Hi, I'm Oliver, and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Another good month for music this month. Lots of things to listen to, lots of things to check out. There's a couple of albums I've really liked this month. I've probably got like a joint album of the month this month because there was two real standouts for me. A couple I didn't like. One that I think is going to be a little bit controversial, but I already dislike that band anyway, so that's not going to be that of a surprise to some of you. The National, Sleepwell Beast. American rock band The National formed in Cincinnati in Ohio in 1999, and since then they've garnered this very formidable reputation of being an intelligent, atmospheric group. Their work has a sophistication about it. It's a restrained energy brimming with these emotive moments. Some people I've had conversations with about this band have a bit of a negative reaction to that restraint, to that kind of approach they take with their music, feeling that they don't do enough to capture their interest because of the restraint. This isn't a reaction that I have with the music. I think it works really well. I think it's a real brimming, fiery undercurrent of energy throughout all their work, and that restraint really makes it what it is. But I'd be keen to hear what you guys think of this band and their approach to their music, so let me know in the comment section down below. Sleepwell Beast is the band's 7th LP since 2001, and although this is pretty early days for this release, for me I think it's up there with records like Alligator, The Boxer, High Violet. From the first minute, this record grabbed me with its undercurrent of melancholy. It pulled me under and made me really feel that emotive weight harnessed by Matt Berninger and co. Nobody Else Will Be There is a gorgeous opener to Sleepwell Beast, and it really signifies the tone of this record. You have a minor key piano motif which is joined with a minimal clicking pattern, which is quite electric, but it's used as a percussive underpinning of the track. And Berninger's vocals are this low, soft croon, that croon that he's so well known for. Strings join towards the end of the track to subtly elevate that emotion, but it's not ostentatious. I think that's another really important thing about the band's approach in general, but also on this record. It's not ostentatious, it's just really well placed. It's carefully included, so it only punctuates. It doesn't become this overly sentimental focus that strings can do if they're used in too much of an ostentatious fashion. Berninger's vocals are one of my favourite things about this record. His delivery is so nuanced, even in the more upbeat moments. So on the track Day I Die, there's this brilliant lyric. It's all about the failings of a relationship anyway, and that's much the focus of this album in many of the tracks. But there's this specific lyric which is, "For years I used to put my head inside the speakers in the hallway when you get too high and talk forever." It just feels devastating. The System Only Dreams in Total Darkness, which was the lead single for this record, it thrills with that spiky guitar line that jars with the overall majesty of the track. It's nice to hear a little bit more experimentation from the band as well. The electronic and tuned percussion opening of I'll Still Destroy You, it's frosty and overcast. It fits perfectly next to a track like Guilty Party, which is a ballad about the dissolution of a marriage that felt painfully true to listen to. There's such an honesty to this work, I think, as well. It feels intimate and honest, and yeah, it just really captures me. As the title track closes out the album, I get an immense swelling of emotions that don't just perforate, but they embody this record. It's a beautiful thing, and it far surpassed my expectations. LCD Soundsystem, American Dream. As I've made clear on a number of occasions on this channel and social media, I have never really got LCD Soundsystem. I've never really liked them. Believe me, this isn't for want of trying. I have listened to their records time and time again to try and glean something from it that I obviously haven't been able to do. I've listened to their self-titled Sound of Silver, This Is Happening, over and over again and tried to get it, but I just don't. Being aware of how revered this band are and how much people connect to their music makes me want to like them even more, because I'm thinking, what don't I get about this band that everybody else seems to see? To me, the music of James Murphy and co. just sounds like heavily derivative disco punk with no discernible personality. It's like art rock without the art, which would just be rock. I get the short-term enjoyment of tracks like Tribulations, Dance Yourself Clean, North American Scum, but when I've listened to those tracks, nothing really sticks with me. They leave my subconscious almost immediately. I don't ever really feel like I want to return to their music, which I think is, obviously fans of the band do want to do that, and that's just not something that I get when I listen to their music. I just don't really understand the reverence that this band has managed to build up over time, because their stuff for me just sounds like fun throwaway, quite heavily derivative. It almost feels like an Emperor's New Clothes situation. I know I'm going to get pitchforked for that, so direct your pitchforks down in the comment section and we'll hash it out there, yeah? If I want dancey New York rock bands, I will go and listen to Les Savy Fab or TV on the Radio, because for me those bands have a lot more substance to their music than LCD Soundsystem do. So yeah, unsurprisingly, this record didn't really do much for me at all. I did feel as if the slightly more soporific style they went for on American Dream worked better than previous records. I mean, that slow burn opening of Oh Baby is probably my favourite thing about this record. I think that was a really well executed track, and it was a lovely collection of synth lines unfurling amongst Murphy's crooning. As soon as second track Other Voices arrives, however, I immediately switched off. That 4-to-the-floor disco beat, James Murphy doing his best David Byrne Talking Heads impression, almost 7 minutes long. I'm alright, thanks. I think I'd just rather go and listen to Talking Heads. That's the other thing. I find this record criminally long at 70 minutes when there are only 10 tracks, and those 10 tracks just amount to these subpar disco rock tracks, in my opinion, perhaps bar the opening track. Closing track Black Screen just feels like a less focused version of Oh Baby, the track that I felt had the most impact here. Stretching out to 12 minutes, I found myself so uninterested in this lackluster, creatively deficient record. Not for me. Hannah Peel, Mary Cassio, Journey to Cassiopeia. For those of you that have been hanging around on the Discord recently, this artist might be recognisable to you. I recently ran a listening party of Hannah's last record, Awake But Always Dreaming, and it was a piece of work that revealed an artist dedicated both to her craft and to the power of concept within music. That record was all about memory, fragmented memory, losing your memory, regaining memory, and it was all based around Hannah meeting up with her grandmother who was in a home, who was suffering from Alzheimer's, and having these conversations, often having repeated conversations, and her grandmother reconnecting, but reconnecting through music. It was a beautiful thing. Now Hannah is back with Mary Cassio, Journey to Cassiopeia, and honestly, alongside the National Sleepwell Beast, is my favourite record of the month. Hannah teamed up with a 33-piece colliery brass band for this album and adopted this alter ego, Mary Cassio. This is her concept for the record. It explores one person's journey to outer space by recounting the story of an unknown, elderly, pioneering electronic musical stargazer and her lifelong dream to leave her terraced home in the mining town of Barnsley, South Yorkshire, to see Cassiopeia for herself. It's wonderfully British, which is what I think gives the album so much character, and the music more than lives up to that audacious, playful concept. The sound of the record is analog synths and brass, and you might think, I'm not sure how that would really work together. The results are something really damn special. The arpeggio synths in the opening track of Goodbye Earth really command the track, but eventually you get this epic thrum of brass, as if the synths are an expression of Mary and her spacecraft, and the brass band are the expression or the embodiment of space and all of its wonders. The record really shows its hand on second track Sunrise Through the Dusty Nebula. It's a title that evokes stunning imagery in your head anyway. The swells of brass on this track are so emotive. Inevitably, the comparison that comes to mind is something like Jupiter from Holst Planet Suite. It carries the same kind of wrecking beauty. These parts were recorded live and were recorded in a way that captured the breathing sounds and the movements of the brass band as they played. This gives this album an incredible dichotomy between intimate and this otherworldly exploration that it just stole my heart. 7 movements of beautiful music. I love this album. Orchid Orange Dwarf, followed by The Planet of the Past Souls, might be my favourite double closer this year. Also, we'll be doing a listening party for this record on Tuesday at 10 o'clock, so please come and join us. Tuesday 10 BST, and we can have a discussion about this. I'm probably going to have quite a lot to say about it because I really do love this album. Mogwai, Every Country's Son. I actually did a written review for this record for Far Out magazine. Some of you might have seen it if you follow me on Twitter or Facebook. So if you want a longer impression of what my thoughts are on this album, I've put a link in the description. Now what I will do is butcher said thoughts for this video review. Mogwai are a Scottish post-rock band that have been going on for a while now. They've constantly released inventive and colourful records, and that is what they're known for. They put on an incredible live show as well, so if you ever do have an opportunity to see them, don't pass it up. Every Country's Son is Mogwai's 9th LP, and a record that operates as a soundtrack to change. So band leader and guitarist Stuart Braithwaite talked in an interview about how this album ended up being like a kind of solace during the recording process, a cocoon against the outside world, which, let's be honest, at the moment is quite a strange place to be, you know, where we live, our countries, the turmoil that we're all facing in the modern world. And Stuart was talking about how this album ended up being like a solace about that, like a beacon of hope in the darkness, if you want to be, overwrought about it. What I got out of listening to Every Country's Son, however, was also the ability to remind the listener of the beauty in the world. So not just being cocooned away from the problems, but reminding you that the problems are part of life and there is still beauty and there's still much to love and much to live for. That's one of the feelings I got when I listened to this music. This flows through the entire record. It's there in that euphoric build-up of opening track Culverine, in the force of the track Old Poisons, and another gorgeous climax that's reached on the track Crossing the Road Material. The track Brain Sweeties really reminded me of fellow post-rock band 65 Days of Static's more recent sound. Those fizzing broad synths, they sounded like they were out of the No Man's Sky soundtrack, or the last record Wild Light that 65 Days of Static put out. Yeah, it was a very similar sound that they went for there, but kudos to the band for using this sound, but it still shaped the tone of the record. It doesn't feel out of place from the rest of the tracks that they've composed and constructed here. Every Country's Son is a strong example of a band taking an emotion, a feeling, and being able to harness it across an entire project. Instrumentally varied yet completely coherent in its delivery. Good stuff. Vane Trio. Vane plays Ravel. Something a bit different here for you guys to check out. Vane Trio are a Swiss piano-led trio, funnily enough. They consist of Michael Arbenz on piano, Thomas Lanz on double bass, and Florian Arbenz on drums. These guys are prodigious. The way they tirelessly construct these incredibly complex passages of music and yet somehow still complement each other is incredible, and it's a brilliant example of the power this type of trio, this type of band construction can have. For this release, Vane Trio have taken influence from French composer Maurice Ravel and have built these 8 tracks as riffs or broadly deconstructionist takes on some of his most influential works. Joining the trio on this release is British saxophone player Andy Shepherd, who adds yet more colour to an already very vibrant group of musicians. The centrepiece of this record, the 60-minute epic bolero in C major, which is probably Ravel's most famous composition, it showcases the way Shepherd effortlessly fits into this already tightly knit trio. This track is a steady ascent to a cacophonous climax, and it's the details that really make you appreciate this music. It's the dynamic expression from Florian Arbenz's snare-centric textures, framing Shepherd's willful sax lines and Michael's fractured chord sequences. As the track nears the end, the entire band come together in these stunning sequences, rushing from individual expression to these taut, charted bars. Sonatina in F-sharp major is another favourite of mine on this record. It's fascinating to hear these pieces of music being reworked in a different genre. I really suggest, if you like this, check out this record and you like it, go and check out the original pieces of music by Ravel as well. Look at some original performances and see how they took these intricate ideas and flourishes and blew them out and worked them and changed them. It's really fascinating to be able to hear that process happening. Good stuff. Mount Kimby, Love What Survives. Another one I actually wrote a review for, so check that one out in the link in the description. Mount Kimby are a strange beast, to be honest, because they came from that post-dubstep sound back in 2009 with those EPs Maybes and Sketch on Glass, and they released that absolute belter of a record, their debut record, Crooks and Lovers, back in 2010, which is an album that I've probably worn to death since it came out. Obviously wanting to diversify and evolve, Kai Campos and Dominic Maker began experimenting past their original sound, and then we get 2013's Cold Spring Faultless Youth, which an album that was confused, unfocused, altogether not very good. What Maker and Campos have succeeded doing on Love What Survives, which is their new record and third LP, is taking a couple of generic conventions and instead of being drowned by them, celebrating them. Okay, so one of the clearest influences on this record is the Motoric beat. Famously, you know, the krautrock Motoric beat, one of the conventions of krautrock that's since been used by artists the world over. Mount Kimby take this Motoric beat to propel many of the tracks on Love What Survives, and they work really well when they harness that sound. It smoulders on opening track 4 Years and One Day. It provides an energetic backbone on the King Cruel featured Blue Train lines, and it triumphantly reveals itself halfway through the track SP12 Beat. When these guys give into that infectious rhythm, they kick this album into a gear from merely good to something exceptional, which is exactly why I wish they had used it more. Originally they'd planned apparently for every single track to have a Motoric beat throughout, and that would be the sonic focus of the record. And I think that the project would have been even more successful had they decided to do that. When this post-punk aesthetic melds with that Motoric beat, I want Maker and Campos to riff on that idea and let the beat simmer for a while. Let those ideas just wash around in your mind the way that very good Motoric music does. You know, if you listen to bands like Noi, the classic krautrock group, if you listen to the way they apply that Motoric beat, they really ride it for a long time and allow it to seep into your conscious, and I think that's really what I wanted from this music as well, because when it's done really well. But this is the major issue that I have with Love What Survives. When Mount Kimby get it right, they really really get it right, but it feels like a lack of confidence wills them to cram in as many ideas as possible rather than sticking with the truly great idea that they've just found. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest, but there are great things here, and I think Campos and Maker are brilliant musicians. I just think they need a little bit more of an injection of confidence. Zola Jesus, Okovi. Nicole Hummel, mostly known by her moniker Zola Jesus, is a US musician, and she's known for her evocative and dramatic music. It's this hybrid of gothic electronic sounds fused with fricative industrial and classic stylings. I've been following Zola Jesus' work for a little while now, and I've liked the majority of the stuff that she's put out, bar the last full-length record, Tega, which aimed at a poppier sound, and it just didn't really land that well. Conatus, The Spoils, Stridulium 2, I'm probably pronouncing those all incorrectly, they're all fantastic, and they're definitely worth checking out if you haven't yet listened to Zola Jesus or really got into her work. Okovi is her 5th full-length release. It returns from that pop-oriented sound of Tega that I was saying didn't really work, and yet it retains some of those sensibilities in a way that I think elevates her songwriting and her music here. This album is good. Second track, Exhumed, has these dark, dramatic string lines, and paired with Hummel's soaring vocals and those clattering electronic beats, in a way kind of reminds me of some of the tracks off of Bjork's Homogenic. It's icy and majestic. In fact, listen to Witness, and it sounds very similar, both strings and vocal delivery, to the track Unravel from Homogenic. And I'm not suggesting here that Zola Jesus is aping that sound by any means, or copying Bjork. It's a compliment, really. You know, if you're able to make music that's comparable to one of the greatest albums of all time, in my humble opinion, then I'd personally be pretty happy. But it has that similar majesty to it, and that connection of string sounds, the electronics, the darkness, but also the elevated, pure voice that Hummel has. It's quite Bjork. Soak is a very tightly written track, and wherein its simplicity is key to making it work. Again, I think something that she took off of the album Tega, some of that simplicity. And that makes this track even better. You hear those requisite string sounds and synths create this background of swirling atmosphere whilst Hummel commands the track with her vocal delivery, and she sings those front-loaded, emotive yet free expressive lines. Take me to the water, I am not free, but I am sorry, I am stone. You should know I would never let you down. Veka is another great track on here. It's so metallic. Hummel surrounds her vocal presence with these sounds that evoke a metalwork factory or something. It's industrial scrapes and scratches that threaten to pierce that purity of her voice. Another impressive release from Zola Jesus. If you haven't listened to this stuff before, make sure you go and check it out. Those are the main reviews I did this month. Here's a few quickies as usual, just to quickly go through them. Godspeed You, Black Emperor. Luciferian Towers. Initially really liked this record. Godspeed are the masters of the impassioned crescendo, aren't they? You know, when they very successfully compose and construct these mood pieces that, at their best, are utterly transcendental. Luciferian Towers is different in the fact that it's the most light-footed of the Godspeed records. It has a brevity to it that I really wasn't expecting from the very political sleeve notes that came with the record, the cover art, and also the quite scary title, Luciferian Towers. It evokes something devilish and dark. And yeah, it does have a brevity to it. I wasn't expecting that from a band that are happy to construct 2-hour records. This release is only 43 minutes long, and in that time the band do a solid job of creating atmosphere, harnessing mood, demonstrating their talent and ability as they always do. But on repeat listening, I'm finding it less and less to enjoy about Luciferian Towers, if I'm honest. I think that's because, apart from the slightly lighter tone of the music, this is exactly what you expect from Godspeed. This is ostensibly a Godspeed record, which there's nothing wrong in that, because why should they make music that isn't theirs? That's their personality, that's their identity. And they're fantastic at doing it. It's just, with some of these huge building crescendos that you're listening to, you always know where they're going. You know, I listened to this album, and rather than, apart from the first listen, which I did feel a real sense of dramatic weight, on repeat listens, I found myself a little bit fatigued by the whole thing, because I felt, well, I've heard this before, and I've heard this done better on their albums like F Sharp, A Sharp, Infinity, Alleluia, Don't Bend, Descend, obviously Lift Your Skinny Fists. So I'm not saying that this is a bad album per se, because I think it's got good things about it. It just doesn't have the same sort of rollicking impact that their previous albums have had. I just disconnect from this more than I do from the rest of their work, and it's still a good release. I just want to see them take their songwriting and maybe shake it up a little bit more the next time round. Maybe incorporate some different instruments and sounds alongside those string-laden swells that they do so well. Yeah, I think this will be a divisive one, a bit like the LCD Soundsystem, so leave your thoughts in the comment section so we can have a discussion about it. Kojey Radical, In God's Body. Okay, firstly, I think Kojey Radical is an incredibly talented guy. His previous EP, 23 Winters, is such an impressive collage of themes and musical styles. It bowled me over. For this project, Kojey communicates this concept whereby the present is reimagined as a utopia built on the ideals of feminism. And it's an absorbing idea. It's a really great concept, and even more so when it's being led by his dexterous wordplay and very passionate delivery. These are the two things that he just has in spades. My primary issue is that in continuing his journey of growing as an artist, this project sounds so much more conventional musically than 23 Winters did. You have a lot of trap influence in there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but on 23 Winters it felt like it was really a collage of styles and ideas, and it stayed away from those conventional sounds in a way that made it feel so fresh. Now, while his wordplay and his delivery feels very fresh on In God's Body, the music is less so. It feels less inspired than it had on his previous project. So much so that despite his magnetic presence, when I've listened to these tracks a few times, nothing's particularly jumping out at me too much. And I think it's because it's not as musically engaging as perhaps it should be. Still worth a listen. I think Kojey Radical has a masterpiece in him. I think that's clear from his artistic ethos and his talent. But this isn't his masterpiece, but it is on the way. So I really think you should keep an eye out on him. And listen to this and listen to 23 Winters, because I think that's a really great record. Ariel Pink, dedicated to Bobby Jameson. I want to like this album so much. I really like Ariel Pink's strange, kaleidoscopic, psychedelic, hypnagogic pop. It's weird and wonderful so much of the time. It's so of its own sound. It sounds anachronistic, but at the same time it sounds like nothing else, which is something so impressively evoked through his music. This time around though, I felt myself resisting the sound of the record. The twee anachronisms on tracks like Dedicated to Bobby Jameson and Feels Like Heaven, they felt a little tired to me. I don't know if that's just because this is now several records down the line and it's a similar sort of sound that he's going for, but something just didn't click for me. Having said that, I did a 180 on Pom Pom when it came out in 2014, so my opinion on this one may change as I let it manifest more and more. Kitchen Witch was a favourite track on the first listen, as well as the fantastic opening track Time to Meet Your God. As proggy as it was synth poppy, it had the great sort of merging of styles and ideas on that. I'll definitely continue to listen to this one. I think in a way, when I reviewed Grizzly Bear's record, Painted Ruins, a couple of months back, it's a similar thing for me. I feel like I need to give this record more time. I think I'm a lot more hot on Painted Ruins than I am on Dedicated to Bobby Jameson, but both of these records are records I feel are going to take a lot more time for me to digest. So again, you may hear me talking about it more in the future on the channel, but right now it's not doing too much for me. Bob Reynolds, Hindsight. Quickly had to mention this one because Bob Reynolds is one of my favourite lesser known jazz musicians around. On this release, Bob, who is known better for playing in Snarky Puppy as well as being in John Mayer's live band, he puts together a quartet of incredibly talented musicians to try and create a vibrant, large sound that you might not expect from a quartet. This record fuses jazz and R&B stylings with rock and pop grooves, and it's that fusion that makes the music immediately infectious, but at the same time it's dense and beautifully performed. It has all these instrumental flourishes from every single member of the band. I really like Bob. I think he does some really interesting things. I think he's definitely worth checking this out. He's also got a great album called Can't Wait for Perfect, which I've listened to for years and loved. He's done some covers of some tracks as well on one of his albums. So yeah, I would suggest checking him out. And I haven't even talked about Chelsea Wolfe, Proto Martyr, Rhapsody, Fortet. You know, the thing is, I've said this before, I don't want this channel to become a reviews channel, so I can't review everything, unfortunately, because again, there's been so many albums this month. But I'm sure I'll try and talk about some of these releases later on down the line anyway. And you know, I might type up my thoughts of a couple of those records in the comment section of this video as and when I do listen to them. But let me know your thoughts on what you've listened to this month. Let me know your thoughts on the records that I've reviewed. Let me know what you disagree with, because there will definitely be some, and what you do agree with as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.